Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today, I will be um, responding to a comment on my YouTube channel asking me to do a video about setup building. So, I'm just going to talk about some of the things I think about for setup and some tips for players. So, I effectively I very rarely will I play an open flag. Um, I like to. My favorite spots are going to be 3 over and 4 over. I don't love center tripods because this bomb can get scouted, and then you have to defend this for a long period of time. Um, I like sometimes to do something like this. If you do this, it's very important that you put a sergeant here that's stationary so that if this bomb's taken out, you can take this out because otherwise it's just a hindrance because the miner can get the flag by hitting either of these. So, like, let's say you had something like this in an end game, it wouldn't matter which one the opponent hit, you would lose the game. So, um, one structure I've played in the past, which of course now that I'm showing it, I can't use it, but something like this because um, you keep everything stationary. If your opponent hits this bomb, then you take it with the sergeant, and this is a bomb. Opponent hits this, then you take it out. Opponent only has one option because, of course, if it's a sergeant as well. So it's a 1 in 4 chance. Corner flags, I'll sometimes play. I don't love them simply because, like, let's say your opponent goes up the big piece, he can control lane and get a minor pass. Also, if you're going to try to defend this, it's much more difficult to defend than a tripod that's like here because you can like just put a piece here and you're completely fine. Um, Also, this is more likely to get explored earlier on in the game than the center. Because let's say your like opponent blitzes down the side with the general, then if you have a corner flag and your marshal's somewhere in the center, then you're completely screwed. So playing corner flags can be quite dangerous. Um, One thing I've done a couple of times is this. Um, where's my flag? I like this because sometimes for high level players because the flag's bombed in, but it's really unpredictable. Nobody expects anything like this. I think I got the idea from Loser Maker. Um, Downsides is, of course, you don't want to do this against lower players because they will literally just run in and randomly take out this bomb for no reason. Like, oftentimes I'll play, I often like to play this high bomb just as a blocker type setup with like a piece here. And so opponent can't really use this lane. Opponents will just often take out this bomb, giving me a free miner, which really makes no sense. But yeah, that's the danger to doing this against someone low. Now, if you play a top level player, you can just completely ignore this, and they'll ignore this structure as meaningless. This bomb is meaningless until it's too late. Like I played this against Zach recently, and yeah, that's basically all I have to say about closed flags. If you're gonna play open, which I would recommend, only if you're like around the same level or worse than the player you're playing. If you're way better than your opponent, you never want to go open. But main thing is you can't play. Uh, more than one or two bombs in the first three rows. Anything more than that is going to cause problems. So if you do something like, I don't know, this, there are only four possible flag spots, because you immediately cross out this, or this being the flag. I guess you could suppose this one might be, though I really don't like something like this. It's just too easy to identify. Um, like if you opponent just random, like let's say opponent is up a kernel, then he has a scout and he decides he wants to find what this piece is to see if he can get a piece. You can just lose the game like that. Whereas that won't really happen. The odds of that happening with a back row flag are far lower, because with a back row flag, at least you should be keeping stationary pieces on top of it, like stuff you're not going to move for a very long time. Maybe something like this. Um, yeah, like this all has to be completely compact. Because let's say that you move all of these guys, um, then these no longer look like flags. I mean, you could try to bluff this, but the odds of a miner just coming in and randomly taking these guys are too high. Or if you get up a lot, then perhaps the opponent will just randomly hit these. It's too risky to leave the flag open like this, and if you leave bombs open, then your opponent's just going to assume these aren't the flag, and they're going to have way better guessing odds. Um, so yeah, well, the only place I've ever played third row flag is on one of these spots. Um, this can be effective if you're able to bluff it as a bomb, though it has the same problem I mentioned earlier of an opponent just scouting it. This even more so because it's out in the open. Um, yeah, oftentimes players will lotto around them, so maybe if you do something like this, it can be more effective, especially if your opponent is guessing at the end of the game. They're much more likely to hit this than they are to hit this. So that's something to consider. Maybe do this if you're playing someone who's very good. Um, yeah, what else? That's pretty much it for flags. Obviously, don't put it in the top two rows, but that's common sense. Um, let's talk about the Marshall. So, Marshall positioning is interesting because there, uh, you can realistically put it in any of the top three rows, maybe occasionally back row. That has some problems, as I'll mention. There are some trade offs to every spot, though. Like if I put it here, then um, let's say I put sergeant, captain, scout, just whatever, these are random piece placements. I use a scout, and then I move like sergeant up, what captain up, sergeant over, and then I keep moving pieces out around this marshal. This marshal is going to become obvious very quickly. So if you're going to play a marshal here, you have to be willing to put it out in the open pretty quickly, um, and hopefully get like a major out of it. If you're the type of player that if your goal in the game is to play for a long time, um, to bluff quite a bit, this is not a good marshal spot for you. This is like a loser maker, sit the marshal out in the open style setup. Um, Now, same principle somewhat applies if it's like here or here. Um, it's just that that time where you're gonna have to sit it out in the open is significantly later. because you can introduce all of these pieces into the game before you're forced to make it clear what this is. So you can like bluff this is a marshal, this is a marshal, like maybe this. You can even sometimes move like third row pieces to show these could be marshals. Maybe you can sit these in the open. You can introduce all these pieces into the game before you're forced to do this. If you just keep moving pieces around here, then it becomes obvious. I don't think it's necessarily obvious if you move this piece out while keeping this one stationary. This could be just a scout. Marshal could be here. Um, like there are many different cases. Now, if you move like every piece in your front row besides this one, and then start moving third row pieces, then it's going to become obvious this is something interesting. So you don't want to do that. You like to just come out with it and see what you can get. If you find a sergeant, that stinks, but such is life. But if you leave it in the open, you're going to guarantee that he's not going to move a good piece next to it. Now, if you put it third row, a few drawbacks. One is you're not prepared to deal with an immediate blitz. Like if your opponent starts lottoing with his general, then you don't really have good means to deal with it. Also, it could become obvious, and it can also make it clear that some spots aren't your flag. Or if you do put it next to your tripod, it can make it more difficult to defend. So, like for example, if I go like this is my tripod, but this is my third row marshal. I move this out. I no longer have a piece here, so my opponent identifies. Well, my opponent is more likely to identify this as a bomb and then go after this as a tripod. I can no longer like just keep a sergeant and a minor stationary, forcing him to guess which one is the tripod. Um, I reveal a lot more of my setup when I put it in the third row. If I do something like this, and my opponent might not think that this is a flag because the marshal is next to it, and the opponent might understand that I'm following this rule because I don't want to leave one of these spots. So most people won't put a bomb next to their marshal. Now, of course, that's not an exclusive principle. As I just mentioned earlier, you can do this, but there are problems. So, of course, the benefit is you can leave your marshal stationary for a way longer time. If you put it here, 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 even you're gonna have to introduce it into the game very quickly. Now, what about back row marshals? Many of the same concepts as the third row marshal. You can make a tripod obvious. You can really reveal a lot of your setup, but the big positive to a fourth row marshal is the fact it's unpredictable. So if you do it occasionally, then that can be a plus. Now, the biggest drawback that's unique to the fourth row marshal is if you get a huge advantage early in the game and your opponent is just going off desperation to lotto, then you're going to have to uh, unbury your marshal and make it really, really obvious. And like if the marshal's here, you're completely fine. You just move it up, and you solidify the position, and the game is completely over. If it's back here, you can't get it out in time. Opponent gets a bunch of pieces. You might get it out eventually, but then it becomes super obvious that the reason you couldn't take him was because the marshal was completely out of position. Um, yes, so that's the major drawback, and um, the reason that I really won't play them very often. Now, one good thing about playing them on occasion like this is you get more bluffing pieces. Like, normally someone wouldn't believe this is a marshal, but you can move it out at some point during the game, and then it looks like a marshal. So that's what Seven Seas did against me. He's played back row marshals against me before, and then he played back row minor, and he bluffed my general with it. He actually got my spy. So that's one way that it can work. General, many of the same concepts as to the marshal. It's a little easier to reveal the general because you don't open yourself up to as many counterattacks. If you show your general, then opponent can't doesn't really get any benefits from attacking with their marshal because the spy is still out there. If you show your marshal, the opponent can immediately counterattack with their general without any sort of fear for moving pieces. Um, Spy, again, many of the same concepts. Uh, I'll play spies behind the lake more, but you do have this problem. Best spy spots are going to be in one of these four, um, maybe or third row. You can put it. A lot of the you can switch. A lot of the time, it's just good to switch up these spots. Like if you notice you've been playing third row a lot, move the marshal up. Same thing with the spy. Same thing with the general. Besides that, there are some rules that I keep with the rest of my pieces. Like, I'd like to have at least two sergeants in the back two rows. I like to have at least four miners in the back two rows. I like to have no more than one high bomb in the top two rows. Uh, I like to keep Uh, it doesn't really matter to me how many captains you have up front. I'll have at least three in the top two rows, but you can. But there's nothing wrong with having four. So I'll sometimes do something like this. Though typically you don't want to do this because, uh, well, if you do something like this, then you can identify a piece and then have some strength. If you go double like this and then you attack it and find a major, then you run into a wall. Though you can sometimes do this for unpredictability. Colonels, I like to have one in the top two rows, one third row. That you can have both. You can have both top two rows. I was having an interesting top conversation with Seven Seas recently about this. He likes to have both top two rows. He says very rarely will he put it third row. Um, I'm I like to have at least one in the third row because it can be a good bluffing piece. Like let's say it turns into a trading game, like marshals and generals trade, and he has one colonel, but his colonel became was revealed earlier in the game. Then I can move my majors out and bluff his colonels, and I can bleed his smaller pieces, all because I have this third row colonel. If I put it in the top two rows as well, then I'm forced to introduce it into the game sooner. Uh, Majors oftentimes two you want to have one or two majors in the top two rows. All three back is bad because it leaves you extremely vulnerable to captains. All three up front is really bad because it allows your opponent to target them. Majors are the best pieces to target in the game because they're just high enough that they have quite a bit of value, but just low enough that they're extremely susceptible to four different pieces: the general, marshal, and colonels. If you, it's really just about your personal preference whether you want to put two or one in the front row. Um, I I pretty much evenly distribute uh, whether I go one or two. I used to go three in the past before I really knew what I was doing. Um, but you really don't want to do that. Like, let's say you show your marshal early, then these are complete targets if they're all high. All right. Lieutenants doesn't really, I don't really think about this very much. I suppose you want to have one lieutenant in the back two rows for the end game. You can't have three high. It really doesn't matter very much. It's mostly about user discretion. Scouts, same thing. Like someone like Seven Seas will use them very quickly. Um, I like to keep one for later in the game, but largely I'm like Seven Seas. I'd much prefer to give up a scout than a sergeant for scouting. Uh, that's pretty much it. If there's anything I didn't cover here, I'd love if you guys told me in the comments so that I can clarify that. Anyway, thanks to you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.